Wrong one. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inshallah, we are starting the Halaqa right now. Today we have special guest speaker Dr. Imad Damaj. He's going to be talking about the Quran and us. This is our fourth Halaqa in the series of Ramadan halaqas that we have for this year. Dr. Imad is a professor at VCU, and I think he teaches pharmacy. Is that correct? Pharmacology. Inshallah, I'm going to go ahead and give Dr. Imad the floor now.
They can see the slides. Okay. All right. Should we start, Walid? Okay. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Walid, for all your kind words and help. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to start our discussion. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, in this blessed of month of Ramadan, we all are aware about the importance of the Quran, especially in this month. In fact, it's called Shahrul Quran. As we Muslims read and hear the text of the Quran, we strive really strongly to permeate ourselves with the spiritual dimensions of its message that goes beyond time, beyond history, beyond people. Because when we read it, when we hear it, it's between us and Allah Azza wa Jal. Because Allah is speaking to us through these words of the Quran, reminding us, counseling us, inviting us, commanding us. And Allah responds to us, to the heart of each one of us individually. No person in between, no intermediary. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. That if my servant asks you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, concerning me, tell them that indeed I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he or she calls upon me. So Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us that the Quran, there is no barrier between you and me. Read the Quran, understand it, live the Quran, and the Quran will be a guidance to you. There's several, but people differ on this. What I mean by differ is you hear two extreme positions sometimes, that there is really no need to study or diploma or imams or scholars to understand the Quran. All what you do is just read it. The Quran is simple, its message is simple, it belongs to everyone. On the other hand, we hear people warning us like, hey, be careful when you read the Quran. Don't make tafsir interpretation. Don't read into it too much because you need to be specialized. You need to study with scholars, imams, mashayikh. You need the help of the scholars into interpreting all this. The reality is, as usual, is in between, because the Quran can be read at several levels. And however, no doubt, doesn't matter how you read the Quran, at what level, what's your level of understanding of the Arabic language, or the Quranic vocabulary, or Islam in general. There is no doubt that we must be aware how the Quran has been constructed. Multiple issues around it. For example, the Quran is not constructed in a chronological, wasn't revealed on Prophet Muhammad ﷺ one time. It was revealed over 23 years. So these important, simple, but important foundations on how the Quran is constructed is important. So at a first level, probably most of us, we go through repetition by reading and reading the Quran in its original language, the Arabic. It gives us a spiritual sense, a reminder, a revival of our soul when we read the Quran. Now, with the help with the translation, we attempt to understand, some of the to reconstruct some of the fundamentals of the Quran. Certain verses, for example, has been revealed in certain contexts, certain times. We know, for example, that the Quran is full of prophetic stories. Some of them are repetitions, bits and pieces here and there. Part of the stories in one verse, part of the stories in another verse in a different ayah, different chapter. So we need to start putting some intellectual effort to group together, to grasp, these different elements together in order to have a better understanding. But there's also levels that require much higher full investment, intellectual and spiritual immersion in the text of the Quran. This is where, people who invest their lives, in fact, and tons of effort and years of their lives to understand the meaning, the interpretation of the verses, try to come up with guidance, understand the guidance from Allah on what are the laws, the rules, the fundamental commandment, how we pray, how we fast, how we do things, how we live our lives. All these, a simple reading like we do, most of us, is not enough. It requires specialized sciences, understanding of Arabic language, understanding of the prophetic tradition, the Sunnah, the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the interpretation of the different scholars, a large amount of scholarly work throughout the history of Muslims to help us to come up with this level of understanding of the Quran. And there is obviously in between. And that's why I encourage myself and encourage all of you, to start, read the text, try your best to understand, and obviously good translation will help. I want to focus today on this Quran, on a very an important aspect of the Quran, which is the stories and parable of the Qurans. In fact, a good majority of the Quran, the verses, is about stories. Stories of the prophets, stories of people before us, stories of the Sahaba, stories of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all these are important because they give us a lot. But how do we approach them? So we can, we can understand the prophetic stories because they will describe for us certain moments of history in the humanity. Interestingly, the Quran, unlike the previous books, is not rich in historical details and about these stories. Because it meant from these stories is to relate to us the meaning of living a life of faith. It gives us many lessons of values from these stories. It gives us, in fact, role models that transcend time and place. Because when we read stories of Prophet Sulaiman, Yusuf, Isa, Musa, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and all these prophets, Adam, it's beyond time and place. And very importantly, that we're not alone. We Muslims are not new. We're part of this unbroken chain, unbroken stories of Iman since Adam alayhi salam. So these are important, things we need to have in mind when we approach the stories of the Quran. Like, for example, take the story of Yusuf. It's a very special story because in the Quranic text is the story that has what we call from A to Z in one place in one chapter. It's called Surah Yusuf. This is not a story, simply a story of a young man who his brothers plotted against him and left him to die in a deep well. And he was taken after that by strangers to a strange land. This is more a story of that provide to us fundamental religious and moral lessons. If you want to summarize it, the story of Yusuf, it's about the upright person, the person of integrity, ethics, and dealing how to deal with wholeness, with timeless and human tendencies, envy, even within the same family, desires and temptation of power and wealth, and desires of temptation when you associate yourself with people of power. And very importantly, it is the story of a human feeling, grief, reconciliation, forgiveness. When loves, when loving someone, even your own sibling, your own parents, loving someone from the opposite gender becomes a story of test. So all these and more in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. I want to today focus on the story of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. The story that is not well, discussed or talked about in many of our circles. So Sulaiman alayhi salam, or Solomon, was the youngest son of Prophet David alayhi salam. He was born in the city of Jerusalem, Al-Quds. And after the death of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he ascended the throne of Judea because he was someone of upright judgment, spiritual insight, moral upbringing, and right understanding. And Allah Azza wa Jal described that in the Quran by saying, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ عِلْمًا, that in verily we gave knowledge from Allah Azza wa Jal to Dawood and Sulaiman. وقال الحمد لله الذي فضلنا على كثير من عباده المؤمنين. And they said, Dawood and Sulaiman, Alhamdulillah, praise to be to Allah who preferred us above many of his believing servants. So indeed, the prophets are special people. They're, provided by Allah Azza wa Jal with grace, with morality, with fadl, and with knowledge. That surah, that story of Sulaiman is full of lessons and moral for us. Temptation of power, the queen of Saba, the issue of superpowers, the angel of death, many, many stories that we can really learn from. I want to focus on one aspect of the story, is the story of An-Namla, the ant and Prophet Sulaiman. So the story goes with Sulaiman making this dua, this prayer, this supplication to Allah Azza wa Jalla. قال رب اغفر لي وهب لي ملكا لا ينبغي لأحد من بعدي إنك أنت الوهاب. He says, Oh Allah, oh my Lord, forgive me. Now notice, at the beginning of the prayer, of the dua, he started by رب اغفر لي, oh Allah, forgive me. Always, when you start your dua, acknowledge Allah's blessing, grace, and ask Him for His forgiveness before you ask Him what you need and what you want. That is an important point, because Allah Azza wa Jal is a sustainer. He's the one who's going to bestow on us and is bestowing on us His grace and His mercy and whatever we ask Him. So he asked Allah. He said, Allah, grant me a kingdom, mulk, that such as it will not belong to anyone after me. Indeed, you are the bestower. Now you ask yourself, why would Sulaiman alayhi salam, the prophet, ask Allah Azza wa Jal for a kingdom that no one else will get before him and after him? So it's very important, because Sulaiman alayhi salam has, because of Allah Azza wa Jal knowledge to him, his moral upbringing, his understanding that Allah Azza wa Jal gave him, and his morality, has the righteous authority over all things. What is important to realize that he has control. Not only you will see the wind, the jinn, and this great understanding of many things that even now, with our technology, we can't even imagine. Sulaiman alayhi salam was able not only in a righteous way to rule this kingdom, but he was can rule over himself. Because if you cannot rule yourself, have a control over yourself, your impulses, your desires, your tendencies, then you're not going to be able to rule over a kingdom. Let alone a kingdom like Sulaiman's kingdom. If you cannot restrain your impulses, your desires, then you're not going to be able to rule a place, especially nowadays with a world so super connected, and with this world around that's almost one village. And I don't have to tell you, getting involved into what's happening nowadays and what we're living, because we have in many places people ruling nations, and they cannot even rule their own impulses and desires. So Sulaiman asked Allah Azza wa Jal for many power, and Allah Azza wa Jal told us, وَوَرِثَ سُلَيْمَانُ دَاوُودَ, and Sulaiman inherited Dawood. وَقَالَ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ, he told people, عَلِّمْنَا مَنْطِقَ الطَّيْرِ وَأُوتِينَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْمُبِينُ. O people, we have been taught the language of bird and been given from all things, and indeed this is evident bounty from Allah Azza wa Jal. Another power, فَسَخَّرْنَا لَهُ الرِّيحَ تَجْرِي بِأَمْرِهِ رُخَاءً حَيْثُ أَصَابَ, and we subjected to him the wind, he can order. Sulaiman alayhi salam was a prophet that was able to order the wind on his command gently whenever he directed. And he was giving the authority over the jinn, this creature that we don't see, that Allah Azza wa Jal created. And the story of the queen of Saba with the jinn in the story of Sulaiman is one example. So he was given all of these power, and you ask yourself, but why you're telling us this? We don't have even, nothing of this power, but we do have power. At some point, we all have our responsibilities, because we all have our share of power. Ourselves to start with, our families, our kids, our co-workers, our people that work with us, if we have a business, and if we're in charge of any responsibility, the public has a public servant. So this is where the story of Sulaiman and how he inherited all this power, and how he dealt with it, and how he sees it, becomes very relevant to us. Comes the story of the end and Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. وحشر لسليمان جنوده من الجن والإنس والطير فهم يوزعون. And we gathered for Sulaiman his soldiers of jinn and man and birds. They were marching on his order. Imagine this huge army with a leader commanding these armies. Soldiers you see and soldiers you can't see. Not only human being and jinn, but birds, all kind of birds. flying around, scouting the whole area, the whole horizon for Sulaiman, telling him who's coming, who's not, what's happening, all of this. If you think now about the power of plane and drones we have, this is nothing. So Sulaiman alayhi salam had this army marching. No one can stop this army by the power of Allah Azza wa Jal. They're marching at orders of Sulaiman. And the Quran described a moment in this march of this army. They came at a valley, and the Quran described it beautifully. حتى إذا أتوا على واد النمل, until they come upon the valley of the ant. قالت نملة يا أيها النمل ادخلوا مساكنكم لا يحطمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. And an ant, a single ant, said, "O ants, enter your dwellings, that they will not be crushed by Sulaiman and his shoulders while they don't know, they don't feel." I mean, they're marching huge army. Why would they pay attention when they step on ants on the ground? Do we, when we walk on our streets, do we pay attention where we walk? Are we paying attention of the insects and ants that we crush when we walk? But an ant, single ant, stood up high and was courageous. A weak creature, one of the weakest creatures we can have, stood up and spoke, was willing to sacrifice herself for her people, for her community. Go back underground to your dwellings. You will be crushed and they wouldn't even notice. And Allah Azza wa Jal described what happened after that. It reminds us that if the Quran is mentioning and describing to us an ant, describing to us the calling of an ant, have we human beings lost the sense of caring of the weak and the voiceless in our communities and societies? If Allah Azza wa Jal heard the call of this ant, this small ant you barely can see, you have to really come very close to see it. What are we human beings doing? Not hearing the voice of the weak and the voiceless in our own communities and in our own societies. And Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us in chapter 6, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ. There is no creature or within the earth or bird that flies with its wings except that they are communities like you. A verse does this, like this one. When you walk today, tonight, after your iftar or before, in your neighborhood, in the street, and see the nature around you, think about this verse. That everything around us, from birds, ants, this insect around us, flies, all of these are communities like us. That remind us also the impact of our steps on this earth, the impact of what we do. How are we impacting, the earth around us, the nature, with the way we walk on earth? And the Quran described in a different chapter Ibadur Rahman, the servants of the merciful, Ibadur Rahman. In these beautiful verses describing who are these servants of Allah, Ibadur Rahman. One of the characteristic of these Ibadur Rahman, the servants of Allah, is Yamshuna al-ardi hawna. When they walk on earth, they walk gentle. And the narrators or the mufassirin, the scholars, who explained the Quran, this verse, talk about many different interpretations of this. What does it mean to walk on earth in gentleness? And one of them is to walk on earth with a light footprint on the nature around us. So all of these, Allah Azza wa Jal describe and had community like us. They may not have the same intellect as us. They may not have the same bounties that Allah gave us, but they are communities like us. And we need to think about how we treat them. Now come the reaction of Sulaiman, that powerful leader, marching a huge army, never seen in human history before or after, will not be seen ever. What was his reaction, alayhi salam? Did he say, what? Ants? Come on, we have a bigger mission. Destroy all this, move on, don't stop. Did he say, who cares? I don't want anyone to stop my army, it's my army. Or did he say like the Quran told us, فَتَبَسَّمَ ضَاحِقًا مِنْ قَوْلِهَا. And Sulaiman smiled of her speech, of what she said. He smiled. وقال رب أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه. And he said, oh Allah, oh my Lord, enable me, give me the strength to be grateful to you for all your favors. Allah gave us this favor to be able to fast. How many people died in this pandemic to now in the world? Over 250,000 people. Many thousands of them are Muslims. 75,000 died in the United States from the coronavirus. Many of them are Muslims who were not able to reach the month of Ramadan like us. So Sulaiman said, oh Allah, give me the strength. Allow me. Give me that ability to be grateful, to say Alhamdulillah to all your favors you have bestowed on me. And upon my parents. What a beautiful, beautiful, say from Sulaiman alayhi salam. Because where do we come? Who raised us? Who brought us on this earth? Our parents. وَأَدْخِلْنِي بِرَحْمَتِكَ فِي عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And he continued and he said, oh Allah, admit me by your mercy in the ranks of the righteous servants. And he's a prophet, son of a prophet. And he's asking Allah Azza wa Jal to admit us, to admit him by his mercy, because without Allah's mercy, we're not going anywhere. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal that he admit us by his mercy in the ranks of the righteous believers and servants. Now, you ask yourself about Sulaiman's behavior. A man who was in charge of a huge kingdom. He never saw that kingdom a private property. he always believed, هذا من فضل ربي. That is from the grace and from Allah, the mercy of Allah. He saw kingdom and he saw leadership has a place or a position of prosperity and submission to the Creator, and not a place of giving order and tyranny. And that's a lesson to all of us, because like I said, we all at a position of leadership and, in charge, either ourselves, our families, small business, small groups, or a public servant. To us, who we possess this much lower power and authority, we need to see this, to need that authority that Allah gave us the same way Sulaiman alayhi salam saw the authority. It is a blessing from Allah and responsibility from Allah. That's why the Quran mentioned when Allah Azza wa Jal narrated to us the story of the creation of Adam and Hawa, that Allah Azza wa Jal told us that I created in this earth Khalifa. Inni ja'alun fil ardi Khalifa. A caregiver, someone who's responsible to make sure that this earth is still, ruled in a way that pleases Allah Azza wa Jal. A ruler that sees this whole earth as a place of submission and grace from Allah Azza wa Jal. Unfortunately, modern world, is pushing us to indulge in our impulses, that economics profits above all. Complete environmental breakdown. We are really living in a pandemic now. Is simply a scary one that didn't happen for the tens of years. A simple reminder about how we are misusing the earth that Allah Azza wa Jal gave us. That khilafah that Allah gave us, the guardianship, we're not doing well. We're not doing well at all. We humankind are violating and ravaging the earth, the nature for decades. All of this in the name of power, in the name of wealth, in the name of earning more and more greed. We are becoming not coronavirus, but, to borrow the Quran's description of another tyranny, another person who did not rule the earth in a grateful way and submitted to Allah. We are becoming not coronavirus, but Qarun virus. Qarun is the story of someone from a Jewish tribe who Allah Azza wa Jal gave him so much wealth that armies of men and horses could not even carry the wealth that he has. And when the people of knowledge, people of piety, reminded him about this, you know what he said? Typical what we hear these days. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. I got all this because of me, my knowledge, my hard work. Not because of Allah's blessing. The opposite of Sulaiman. What Sulaiman said, that أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك. Please give me the strength, the ability to be thankful that all that you gave me, I'm going to give back to the communities, to those voiceless people, the masakin, the poor, the needy. This man, Qarun, said, no, I studied hard. I went to college, man. I worked hours. This is all mine. What was the result? Read that story of Qarun. What was the result of this behavior, this arrogance, this allowing your impulses of greed and control running free? فخسفنا به الأرض وبداره الأرض. Allah Azza wa Jal. We had this earthquake and we shattered earth with him and all of this, his belongings, his wealth. They're gone. Nothing else. So we have to be very careful because Allah Azza wa Jal told us, إِنَّا كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَنَاهُ بِقَدَرٍ. We created everything on this earth in the right proportion, in the mizan. You know, there is a balance, right balance. When we start messing up with this balance, with this proportional, a lot of bad things could happen. And it's from us. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ. The Quran says, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ. From what you earn your own hand, or son of Adam's. So Sulaiman alayhi salam's story is a reminder that all the wealth we have, all the bounties that we have, all the everything that Allah gave us is from Allah. هذا فضل ربي, from Allah Azza wa Jal. But has a reason. ليبلوني أشكر أم أكفر. To test me, am I going to be thankful? Or am I going to be disbeliever? The literal word, akfar here, to disbelieve, but really here is to be in denial of Allah's bounties on us, to cover up what Allah gave us all. At certain time or point, we have to really, internalize these concepts that we talked about in Surah Sulaiman, in the story of Sulaiman, Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. That the secret of success in our life is this self-control that requires mujahada, requires this jihad. That self-control comes by us reading that Quran, trying our best to make our prayers, to follow the command of Allah Azza wa Jal, to do this intellectual, spiritual effort to be a better person, to be closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. And when we have this effort, then we start having better self-control of our tendencies, our desire, our impulses. And we can have this balanced life. How we live not only personally, our own lifestyle, but how we live on this earth. Because Allah Azza wa Jal told us in this story, the story of this weak creature. Simple. How many of us, sometimes we walk in the streets and see people in need? I remember when I was walking in the street of San Francisco, you will see homeless people around you all over the city. And you walk, you just don't pay attention. They ask you, $1, can you help? I can't eat. And some of us will be thinking, I know they're professional homeless beggars. I know they're not serious. I know they're gonna take our money and go drink or use drugs. But you don't know. Remember that weak ant who raised her voice, was willing to sacrifice herself for the voiceless, for the people who were in danger. Next time you walk by someone, even if you want to help, you can't help them. Even if you didn't help them, soften your heart. And look at them as people like you, that Allah has blessed you, gave you things. And you know what? Maybe they'll say a word that will have great impact on you. How many stories do we hear from people who embraced Islam in our communities in this country, where what helped them is a story they heard. They heard someone saying something to them, something they saw. And that ant, small ant, came here to remind us about how do we deal with power? How do we deal with other people? How do we deal with authority and people who have authority? And how should we care, to the voiceless people, to the weak, to the needy? And how do we deal with our environment? And how do we live with our lives? We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help us, to forgive us, to grant us the strength to struggle, to be able to be in control of our own selves, nafs, to be thankful to Him. Yes, we're living very tough times, challenging time. But let me tell you, when things start easing out, and they will, inshallah, there'll be a lot of need, a lot of work that we as a community needs to be doing individually and collectively. Ask yourself, how are my neighbors? How are the people in my community? How are the people in Richmond doing? Am I doing what I can to help? Allah Azza wa Jal will bless us, bless our families, inshallah, if we can give and if we can help. May Allah Azza wa Jal forgive us, forgive our sins, accept from us, inshallah, our siyam, our iftar, our dua, our taraweeh, and our prayers. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وجزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.